The space station Orion Nexus was one of the busiest trade hubs in the galaxy. Merchants, travelers, and diplomats from hundreds of species walked through its glowing corridors. Among them was Ethan Carter, a human engineer, who had been working on the station for the past 6 months. His job was simple: fix broken things. But today, something far stranger than a malfunctioning system was about to happen. Ethan wiped the sweat off his forehead as he finished repairing a power relay. His toolkit hummed softly as he placed his wrench inside. "Finally done," he muttered. It had been a long shift, and he was ready for a break. Just as he turned around, he felt something. No, someone bump into him. It wasn't hard, just a light brush against his arm. He barely noticed it at first, but the reaction from the person who touched him was immediate and shocking. A soft golden glow lit up the corridor. Ethan looked up and saw a tall, slender alien girl standing in front of him. Her skin was a soft shade of violet, her silver hair falling in gentle waves over her shoulders. But what caught his attention was her wrist, where an intricate bioluminescent marking pulsed with golden light. She stared at it in shock, her bright sapphire eyes wide with disbelief. Around them, aliens paused in their tracks. A few whispered, and others gasped. Ethan had no idea what was going on, but it was clear that this was not normal. The alien girl took a shaky step back, her glowing wrist trembling. This isn't possible." Her voice was soft, but filled with panic. Ethan frowned. Sorry. Did I do something?" He lifted his hands, confused. The girl didn't answer. She was too busy staring at her wrist, as if it had betrayed her. The glow was still there, pulsing steadily. Before Ethan could say another word, a group of armored station guards rushed forward. Their sleek black uniforms and gold insignias marked them as security officers. One of them, a tall reptilian alien, narrowed his yellow eyes at Ethan. "Human. Step back." Ethan blinked. "Step back. I didn't do anything." The reptilian guard didn't seem to care. He turned to the girl. "Xena, explain yourself." Xena. So that was her name. Ethan stored that in his memory. Xena looked distressed. She opened her mouth as if to explain, but then she hesitated. Finally, she whispered, "My indicator." It reacted. The guard stiffened. The reptilian officer's eyes widened. "That's impossible." Ethan, still completely lost, crossed his arms. "Okay, can someone tell me what's happening? What's an indicator? And why is everyone acting like I just broke the universe?" Xena looked at him, uncertainty flickering across her face. She seemed to struggle for words before she finally spoke. "The Illyri indicator only reacts when we meet a perfect match." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "A what?" She swallowed hard. "A perfect life match." Ethan's brain froze for a second. The words didn't quite make sense at first. Then, like a delayed explosion, realization hit him. Wait, was she saying that her glowing wrist meant they were compatible? The silence in the corridor was heavy. Everyone was watching. The tension was thick enough to cut with a blade. The reptilian guard was the first to break it. He turned to Xena and said in a grave tone, "Come with us." Now. Xena flinched. She looked at Ethan one last time, her sapphire eyes filled with something between confusion and fear. Then, without another word, she hurried away with the guards. Ethan took a step forward. "Hey, wait." The reptilian officer blocked his path. "Do not interfere, human." His voice was firm. "You do not understand what you have just done." Ethan felt a chill down his spine. What he had just done? He hadn't done anything. The guards disappeared down the corridor, leaving Ethan standing there, alone, in the middle of the silent crowd. The golden glow from Xena's wrist had faded, but the memory of it burned in his mind. Something told him that whatever had just happened was only the beginning. Ethan Carter couldn't get the image out of his head. Xena's glowing wrist, her wide sapphire eyes, and the way she had hurried away with the station guards as if she had done something wrong. But what had happened? He sat at his workstation, staring at a half-fixed circuit board. But his mind wasn't on his work. He had seen many strange things since coming to Orion Nexus, but this was different. He wasn't used to aliens looking at him as if he had just broken the rules of the universe. Sighing, he turned to his coworker, a stocky, four-armed alien named Brask. "Hey, Brask, ever heard of Ilari indicators?" Brask's 4 eyes blinked. He set down his welding tool and gave Ethan a long look. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should tell the truth, but curiosity got the better of him. "I might have touched an Ilari girl," and her indicator thing started glowing. Brask froze. His usually calm face turned serious. "You're joking." "Nope." Brask let out a low whistle. "You're in trouble, my friend." Ethan frowned. "Why? What does it mean?" Brask rubbed his chin. Ilari indicators only glow when they find a perfect match, someone who is biologically and emotionally compatible. It's rare, even among their own species. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So it's like a soulmate thing." Brask snorted. "Yeah, but way more serious. It's a sacred tradition for them. If an Ilari's indicator reacts, it's considered a bond for life. There's no breaking it." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You mean to tell me this girl, Xena, her glowing wrist, means she's supposed to be with me?" Brask nodded. "That's exactly what it means." Ethan leaned back, stunned. He barely knew Xena. They had exchanged, 3 sentences, and now some alien biological system had decided they were perfect for each other. That didn't make sense. "But I'm human," Ethan said. "That can't be normal." Brask gave him a serious look. "It's not." A cold feeling crept into Ethan's chest. What if this wasn't just strange? What if it was dangerous? Meanwhile, in the Ilari embassy, Xena sat on a large, circular seat inside the Ilari High Embassy on Orion Nexus. The chamber was dimly lit, except for the soft glow of the floating energy orbs above. Her parents stood before her father, Ambassador Valen, and her mother Illyria, both looking deeply troubled. Valen's golden eyes narrowed. "You touched a human, and your indicator reacted." Xena nodded hesitantly, staring at the faint golden glow still lingering on her wrist. "It's not supposed to be possible." Illyria stepped forward, her voice tight with concern. "And Illyria's indicator should never react to another species. Our ancestors designed this system to ensure the purity of our bonds. If it has reacted to a human..." She trailed off, as if the idea itself was too shocking to finish. Valen's expression darkened. It must be a mistake. Xena swallowed hard. But what if it's not? Her father's jaw tightened. Then you have put yourself, and our entire family, in a very difficult situation. Xena's hands curled into fists. She never asked for this. She had spent her whole life following Ilari customs, preparing for the day her indicator would lead her to her destined match. And now it had chosen someone who wasn't even Ilari. "I should go see him," she said suddenly. Her mother's eyes widened. "No, you must stay away from that human." "But I need answers." "There are no answers, Xena. If the council finds out about this, they could exile you." Xena's chest tightened. Exile. That was unthinkable. Ilari who defied the traditions were stripped of their status, their home, their identity. And yet, as much as the thought of exile scared her, another feeling burned stronger inside her. Curiosity. Why had her indicator reacted to Ethan? She needed to find out, no matter the cost. Ethan's determination. Ethan couldn't let it go. He had tried to focus on work, but his mind kept replaying the moment Xena's wrist had glowed. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was a malfunction. Maybe her species had some unknown connection to humans. He decided he wasn't going to sit around and wait for answers. He was going to find her. After his shift, he walked straight to the Ilari district of the station. It was a quiet, elegant part of Orion Nexus, with curved silver buildings and floating gardens. Two Ilari guards stood at the entrance to the embassy. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I need to see Xena." The guards looked at him as if he had just insulted their ancestors. One of them, a tall female Ilari with glowing blue eyes, folded her arms. "State your purpose, human." Ethan wasn't sure what to say. He couldn't exactly announce. "Hey, your girl's indicator thing said we're meant to be together. I just need to talk to her," he said. The guards didn't move. "Leave." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I think she deserves to talk about it too." The guards ignored him. Ethan clenched his fists. He wasn't about to give up. If Xena was in trouble because of him, then he needed to make sure she was okay. There had to be another way to reach her, and Ethan Carter wasn't the type to walk away from a mystery. Ethan Carter was not a man who liked being ignored. The Ilari guards had refused to let him see Xena, but he wasn't about to give up that easily. His mind raced with possibilities. If her people thought this whole glowing indicator thing was a mistake, would they try to hide it? Would they force her to deny it? The thought made him uneasy. He needed to find another way to reach her. That night, Ethan sat in a quiet corner of a small diner on Orion Nexus, thinking about his next move. The station's artificial sky had dimmed to simulate nighttime, and most of the other workers had gone back to their living quarters. He had just finished his meal when a shadow fell over his table. A hooded figure slid into the seat across from him. For a moment, Ethan tensed, ready for trouble, but then the figure lowered their hood. Xena. Her sapphire eyes flickered with caution as she glanced around the diner. "You shouldn't have come looking for me," she whispered. Ethan leaned forward. "You ran off after that thing happened. You didn't even explain." She looked down at her wrist. Though the glow had faded, Ethan could still see the faint golden shimmer beneath her skin. She exhaled softly. "Because I didn't know what to say." Ethan studied her face. She looked troubled, as if she was fighting an internal battle. "You know what this means, don't you?" he asked. Xena hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then explain it to me." She took a deep breath. "Ilari indicators are designed to glow when we touch our destined partner. It's part of our biology, something that has guided our people for centuries. But," she looked up at him, her expression full of uncertainty, "it should be impossible for it to react to a human." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And yet here we are." She shook her head. "I don't understand how it happened. My parents don't understand either. But one thing is certain." She lowered her voice. "This is dangerous." Ethan frowned. "Dangerous? Why?" Xena glanced around the diner again, making sure no one was listening. "If the Ilari High Council finds out, they could see this as a threat to our traditions. They might try to separate us permanently." Ethan didn't like the sound of that. "You mean they'll force you to reject it?" Xena bit her lip. "Worse." Ethan leaned back, letting out a frustrated sigh. "So what do we do?" She looked at him with a mix of fear and determination. "I need to find out the truth. There has to be a reason why this happened. Maybe something in our DNA, something the council doesn't know about. But I can't do it alone." Ethan nodded. "Then I'll help." Xena's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I want to." Ethan interrupted. "Look, I don't know much about Ilari customs, but I know when something doesn't feel right. If your people are trying to hide this, then it means there's something they don't want us to know." Xena looked at him for a long moment, as if searching his face for doubt, but all she found was certainty. Finally, she nodded. "Then we'll have to work in secret." Ethan smirked. "I like a good mystery. Uncovering the truth." The next day, Xena sent Ethan a coded message with instructions to meet her in an abandoned sector of the station, an old research lab that had been shut down years ago. He arrived early, making sure no one had followed him. A few minutes later, Xena slipped in through a side door, carrying a small data tablet. She placed it on the dusty table between them. This is everything I could find on interspecies genetic compatibility. Ethan glanced at the screen. Most of it was scientific jargon, but one section caught his eye. It was a classified Illyri document, marked with the symbol of the High Council. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Xena hesitated. "I borrowed access to my father's research files." Ethan whistled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." Xena didn't smile. Instead, she pointed at a section of the report. "Look at this." Ethan leaned closer. The document described a long-forgotten experiment, one that suggested the Illyri and humans shared a distant genetic link. "This can't be right," Ethan muttered. "Are they saying humans and Illyri have some kind of ancient connection?" Xena nodded. "And if that's true, it might explain why my indicator reacted to you." Ethan rubbed his chin. "But why would they hide this?" Xena's expression darkened. "Because if it's true, it means our people have been wrong about the indicators all along. The High Council built our entire society around the idea that Illyri can only bond with each other. If they admit that's not true, everything changes." Ethan exhaled. "So they erased the research." Xena nodded. "And if they find out that we know," Ethan finished the sentence for her, "they'll do whatever it takes to keep it secret." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Ethan truly understood the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about them. It was about a truth that had been hidden for generations. Xena swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" Ethan's eyes hardened with determination. "We find more proof. And when we do, we make sure the truth comes out." Xena hesitated, then reached out. Her fingers brushed against Ethan's hand. And this time, her indicator flared to life, glowing even brighter than before. Ethan looked at her. She looked at him. And they both knew there was no turning back now. Ethan stared at the golden glow on Xena's wrist. The light pulsed gently, as if responding to his touch. This wasn't some accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was real. Xena pulled her hand back, her breathing unsteady. "It's stronger this time," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "That means we're getting closer to the truth." Xena's expression was conflicted. "Ethan, if the High Council finds out what we're doing, they won't just stop at warnings. They will erase everything. This research, our connection, and maybe even..." She hesitated. Ethan clenched his fists. "I won't let them do anything to you." Xena looked into his eyes, seeing the determination in them. A small part of her wanted to believe in his confidence. "We need more proof," Ethan said. He tapped the screen of the data tablet, scrolling through the old files. This research was buried for a reason. Someone didn't want the Illyri people to know about it. Xena nodded. "There's only one place where we might find the full records, the Central Archives on the High Council station." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That place is heavily guarded, isn't it?" "Yes," Xena admitted, "but there might be a way in." Ethan smirked. "Tell me." "A risky plan." The Central Archives were located on a restricted section of the station, accessible only to High Council members and elite researchers. But Xena had an advantage. Her father was a respected scientist, and she had temporary clearance to visit certain research facilities. "The security systems recognize my ID," Xena explained. "I can get us inside, but once we start searching for classified data, the system might trigger an alert." Ethan grinned. "So we have to be quick." Xena nodded. "Very." That night, they made their way through the dimly lit corridors of the station, avoiding the main pathways. Xena led Ethan to a restricted entrance, where she scanned her ID. The door slid open with a soft hiss. "So far, so good," Ethan whispered. Xena glanced around before stepping inside. The Central Archives were vast, filled with rows of holographic data terminals. The blue glow of the screens cast eerie shadows across the room. Xena moved to one of the main terminals and entered a bypass code she had memorized. The screen flickered before displaying a long list of files. She typed quickly, Human Illyri genetic compatibility. The screen flashed red. Access restricted. Authorization required. Zaina gritted her teeth. I need a deeper level of clearance. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. Can you hack it? Zaina hesitated. If I try, it might trigger security. Ethan thought for a moment. Then let's make sure we're ready to run. Zaina took a deep breath and typed in an override sequence. The screen flickered, and suddenly, files started unlocking. Pages upon pages of old research appeared before them. Ethan's eyes widened. This is huge. They quickly scanned the data. The documents confirmed what they had suspected. Illyri and humans shared an ancient genetic connection. At some point in history, their species had a common ancestor, which meant the indicator system had always been flawed. Ethan clenched his jaw. They lied to everyone. Zaina's hands shook as she scrolled further. And there's more. The High Council knew about this for centuries. Before she could read further, a loud alarm blared across the room. Intrusion HTTP. Security loxiki devduin initid. Ethan grabbed the tablet. Time to go. The escape. Zaina led the way, moving quickly through the dark corridors. They could hear the footsteps of approaching guards. Ethan glanced at her. Any backup exits? There's a maintenance tunnel ahead, she said, pointing down a narrow hallway. As they ran, a pair of Illyri security officers appeared at the end of the corridor. Freeze, one of them shouted. Zaina hesitated for just a second, then grabbed Ethan's arm. This way. She pulled him into a side passage, where they squeezed through a small vent leading to the lower maintenance level. They could hear the guards chasing after them, but the darkness of the tunnel gave them a few seconds to escape. Keep moving, Ethan whispered. After a tense few minutes, they emerged into an empty storage bay. The alarm was still blaring, but for now, they were safe. Zaina leaned against the wall, catching her breath. That was too close. Ethan checked the tablet. But we got the files. Zaina nodded, her eyes filled with emotion. Ethan, this information could change everything. Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. Then let's make sure the right people see it. Zaina looked at him, then at her wrist, where the golden glow had faded once more. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain. They couldn't turn back now. Ethan and Zaina sat in the dimly lit storage bay, their hearts still racing from the chase. The tablet in Ethan's hands held the truth, a secret hidden for centuries by the High Council. Zaina rubbed her temples. We have proof now, but what do we do with it? Ethan's jaw tightened. We expose it. Zaina glanced at him, uncertain. It's not that simple. The High Council controls all media. If we send this out the wrong way, they'll erase it before anyone sees it. Ethan frowned, thinking. Then we find someone they can't silence. A risky ally. Zaina sighed. There's only one person who might help. Professor Liar. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Who's that? He's one of the last independent scholars left in the Illyri system, she explained. He's been questioning the Council's rules for years. If we get this to him, he might know how to spread the truth. Ethan smirked. Sounds like our kind of guy. Zaina tapped her wrist communicator, sending a secure message. Within moments, a reply came through. Meet me at the old observatory. Come alone. Ethan exhaled. Well, that doesn't sound suspicious at all. Zaina gave him a nervous look. We don't have a choice. The meeting. The old observatory stood on the edge of the station's outer ring, abandoned for years. The large glass dome above them revealed a stunning view of the stars. A figure stepped from the shadows, a tall, silver-haired Illyri man with piercing blue eyes. Professor Liar, Zaina greeted cautiously. Liar studied them both before speaking. You wouldn't contact me unless it was important. His gaze shifted to Ethan. And you brought a human. That tells me it's very important. Ethan held up the tablet. We found something. Something big. Liar took the device and scanned the data. His expression hardened as he read. This changes everything, he muttered. The Council has built their entire rule on the belief that humans and Ilari are separate, incompatible. He looked at Xena, but this proves they are wrong. Xena nodded. We need to get this out to the people. Liar sighed. Easier said than done. The Council's reach is vast. He paused, then turned to Ethan. But they fear one thing. Humans. Ethan raised an eyebrow. I'm flattered. Liar gave a small smile. Your kind is unpredictable. They can control Ilari, but humans, not so easily. If a human spreads this information, the Council won't be able to suppress it fast enough. Xena frowned. That's too dangerous. Ethan could be targeted. Ethan shrugged. I've been through worse. Liar nodded. Then we act now. The broadcast. Liar led them to a hidden communication room beneath the observatory. The old system was outdated, but still functional. This channel connects to off-world colonies. Liar explained. Once the message is out, it will be impossible to stop. Ethan activated the console. A camera blinked to life. He took a deep breath and began. To all who can hear this, my name is Ethan Carter. I am a human, and I am here with Xena, an Ilari scientist. We have uncovered the truth that has been hidden for centuries. He held up the tablet. The High Council has lied. Humans and Ilari share a deep connection. The so-called indicator is not a divine sign. It is a remnant of a past they don't want you to remember. They fear the truth because it threatens their control. Xena stepped forward. We are not enemies. We are not different. And it's time for everyone to know the truth. Liar quickly encoded the message and sent it to multiple relay stations. Within minutes, it was out of the Council's hands. Xena exhaled. It's done. Ethan nodded. Now we wait. The Council's response. It didn't take long for the High Council to react. Security forces swarmed the observatory within the hour. Liar handed Ethan a small data chip. Take this. It holds all the evidence. If something happens to us, you must ensure it reaches the right people. Ethan took it and pocketed it. We're not losing. Before they could escape, the doors burst open. A squad of Ilari enforcers stepped inside. A tall figure followed them. Chancellor Veros, head of the High Council. He eyed Xena with cold disapproval. You have betrayed your people. Xena stood firm. No, you betrayed us first by hiding the truth. Veros turned to Ethan. And you've meddled in affairs that do not concern your kind. Ethan crossed his arms. The truth concerns everyone. Veros sighed. It's too late to erase your message, but you won't be around to see the consequences. He raised a hand, signaling his guards. Xena's heart pounded. Ethan. Before she could finish, the enforcers lunged forward. Ethan grabbed Xena's hand and bolted toward the back exit. Liar stayed behind, blocking the path. Go. I'll hold them off. Xena hesitated. Professor. Go. Ethan pulled her through the doorway. The last thing they saw was Liar standing defiantly as the guards moved in. On the run, Ethan and Xena sprinted through the lower corridors. Alarms blared across the station, marking them as fugitives. Xena glanced at Ethan. We have to get off this station. Ethan grinned. I know just the place. Ahead of them was a docking bay, and inside, a small human freighter waiting for departure. Xena looked at him. You planned this. Ethan smirked. Always have a backup plan. As they rushed toward the ship, Xena glanced down at her wrist. The golden glow was brighter than ever. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The alarms continued to blare through the space station as Ethan and Xena ran toward the docking bay. Their breaths were heavy, their hearts pounding, but neither slowed down. Behind them, the High Council's enforcers were closing in fast. "We're almost there," Ethan shouted. Zaina's wrist indicator glowed even brighter, casting a golden hue over her skin. It wasn't just reacting to Ethan's presence anymore. It was pulsing, as if guiding her. She didn't have time to think about it. They had to escape first. The last chance to escape. As they reached the docking bay, a human freighter stood waiting. Its engines were humming, ready for departure. Ethan grinned. "Captain Reynolds always leaves his ship running in case of trouble," he said. Zaina didn't care how he knew that. "Then let's move." They sprinted toward the open ramp, but just before they reached it, a force field activated, blocking the entrance. Zaina gasped. No, they locked it. Ethan cursed under his breath and turned to see 3 enforcers stepping into the docking bay. The leader, a tall Illyri officer, glared at them. "Surrender now." Ethan clenched his fists. They were trapped. A desperate gamble. Ethan scanned the docking bay and noticed a control panel near the force field's power supply. He turned to Zaina. "Can you disable that?" Zaina nodded. "I can try." Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands. All right. No need for weapons." The enforcers hesitated for a moment. That was all Ethan needed. He grabbed a loose cargo crate and hurled it at them. It wasn't a perfect throw, but it was enough to make them stumble back. Zaina raced to the panel, her fingers flying across the controls. Almost there. One of the enforcers recovered and aimed a stun weapon at her. Ethan didn't think. He just moved. He tackled the enforcer before he could fire, sending both of them crashing to the floor. Zaina pressed a final button. The force field flickered and deactivated. Ethan. Now. He shoved the enforcer away and sprinted up the ramp with Zaina right behind him. As soon as they were inside, Ethan slammed his fist against the emergency launch button. The ramp sealed shut, and the ship blasted away from the docking bay. They had escaped. In the safety of space. Ethan collapsed into a chair, breathing hard. Zaina leaned against the wall, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We made it." Ethan chuckled. "Told you I had a plan." Zaina rolled her eyes but smiled. "That was reckless." He shrugged. "Worked, didn't it?" They shared a relieved laugh. But the moment was short-lived. Zaina looked down at her wrist. The glow had changed. It wasn't just reacting to Ethan anymore. It was spreading through her veins, forming intricate golden patterns on her skin. Ethan frowned. "But, is that normal?" Zaina shook her head. "No, this has never happened before." She touched the glowing lines and felt something. A deep warmth, like a memory waking up inside her. And suddenly, she understood. The truth revealed. Zaina looked at Ethan, her eyes wide. "Ethan, I think I know why the council hid this secret." He leaned forward. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "The indicator, it's not just a biological reaction. It's a connection." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "A connection to what?" Zaina hesitated. Then she reached out and gently placed her hand over Ethan's. The moment their skin touched, a flood of images filled her mind. A history long forgotten. Illyri and humans standing side by side, working together, sharing knowledge. A great war that separated them. The High Council rewriting history, erasing the past. And the final truth, humans and Illyri were never supposed to be enemies. They were always meant to be allies. The indicator wasn't just reacting to a human's presence. It was recognizing a bond that had always existed. Zaina pulled her hand back, gasping. Ethan watched her carefully. "What did you see?" She met his eyes. "The truth. The real truth." Ethan frowned. "And what do we do with it?" Zaina's glowing wrist pulsed again. "We find the others who still remember." Ethan nodded. "Then let's get started." Their journey wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The freighter soared through the dark expanse of space, leaving the Illyri station far behind. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence as Ethan and Xena sat in the small cockpit, catching their breath. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "All right, we escaped. That's the hard part done." Xena looked at him, her golden wrist indicator still glowing faintly. "No, Ethan. The hard part is just beginning." Ethan sighed. "Yeah, I figured." The memories Xena had seen still burned in her mind. The Illyrian humans were not meant to be enemies. They were connected in ways the High Council had hidden for centuries. And now, she and Ethan were the only ones who knew the truth. The search for answers. Xena tapped into the freighter's navigation system, scanning nearby planets. "We need to find someone who remembers," she murmured. "Someone who can help us prove this to the galaxy." Ethan leaned forward. "And how do we do that? The High Council will want us silenced." Xena's fingers hesitated over the controls. "There was a name in my vision. An Illyri elder, someone who lived before the Council changed history." She turned to Ethan. "If he's still alive, he might have the answers." Ethan grinned. "Sounds like a good place to start. Where do we find him?" Xena took a deep breath. "A remote planet. Velmera." Ethan typed in the coordinates. The ship's computer beeped as it confirmed the location. "Then let's go," he said. As he activated the ship's hyperdrive, the stars outside stretched into bright streaks of light, and they vanished into the void. Arrival on Velmera. Hours later, the ship emerged from hyperspace, approaching a quiet, green planet. Velmera was a forgotten world, covered in thick jungles and towering cliffs. Few travelers came here, which made it the perfect hiding place for an elder who didn't want to be found. Ethan brought the ship down carefully, landing in a small clearing. The engines powered down, and silence settled around them. Xena checked her wrist. The glow had changed again, pulsing faster, as if sensing something nearby. "He's here," she whispered. Ethan grabbed a small bag and checked his sidearm, just in case. "Let's find him." Meeting the elder, they made their way through the dense jungle, guided by Xena's glowing wrist. Birds with shimmering blue feathers darted between the trees, and strange flowers pulsed with bioluminescent light. After an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing. A simple stone hut stood at the center, surrounded by carved symbols that looked ancient, older than the High Council itself. Ethan stepped forward, but before he could knock, the door creaked open on its own. A tall, aged Illyri with silver markings on his skin stood before them. His golden eyes studied Xena for a long moment before he finally spoke. "You've seen it, haven't you?" His voice was deep and calm. Xena's breath caught in her throat. You know about the indicator." The elder nodded. "I was alive before the High Council erased the truth." Ethan crossed his arms. "Then you know what this means. Humans and Illyri. We were never supposed to be enemies." The elder stepped back and gestured for them to enter. "Come inside. There is much you must learn." The forgotten truth. Inside the hut, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs. Ancient scrolls lined the walls, filled with forgotten history. The elder sat on a woven mat and gestured for them to do the same. "You are correct," he said. "Long ago, our species were allies, but the High Council feared losing control. So they rewrote history, telling future generations that humans were dangerous." Ethan clenched his jaw. "And the indicator, why does it react to me?" The elder smiled. "Because the bond between our species was never truly broken. The indicator is a symbol of that connection. When an Illyri touches a human with a strong spirit, the glow returns, a reminder of what we once were." Xena stared at her wrist. "So, I was meant to find him." The elder nodded. "And now, you must decide what to do with this knowledge." Ethan exchanged a glance with Xena. "We can't keep this to ourselves," he said. "The galaxy deserves to know the truth." The elder's eyes darkened. "The High Council will try to stop you." Ethan smirked. "They can try." A new mission. As they left the hut, The jungle around them felt different, like the air itself had shifted. Xena looked at Ethan. If we tell the galaxy the truth, we'll be putting ourselves in danger. Ethan grinned. Wouldn't be the first time. Xena chuckled. You humans really are reckless. Ethan shrugged. That's why we make good allies. Xena's wrist pulsed one last time, shining brighter than ever. It wasn't just an indicator anymore. It was a beacon. The truth was out there. Now it was time to make sure the whole galaxy knew it. And no matter what the High Council did, they couldn't stop the truth forever.